My name is Thomas Ketcherman, and I'm to facilitate the readings of the American Exceptionalism Revisited, The Importance of Management by Sanford Jacoby. The overall reading theme dramatized a lot of the unionization patterns and trends worldwide, how America itself has less union trends than the rest of the world. A few of the observations I made during the reading had America had management development uh, programs to foster employee anti-unionism uh, through the New Deal legislation led to support of the collective bargaining and the restraint of repressive tactics. Also, managers of the newly unionized companies suffered and what they called an unparalleled loss of self-esteem and community standing. I guess that felt that they have received negative feedback or treatment from their own communities because they allowed their company to become unionized, which was seen as being weak, especially from managers' point of view. Some of the readings actually linked to the Frederick Taylor scientific management techniques, where the companies that successfully avoided unionization included sophisticated communications and survey techniques. They were based on behavioral sciences, and these behavioral sciences could be linked to Taylor's scientific management theories from our first reading. Some of the questions that I saw that should have been answered and could be addressed, and maybe some other people have thought of these as well. Um, why are American companies so against the unions when especially companies from Britain actually welcome them for collective bargaining arrangements? Another question are other countries such as Great Britain more likely to be easier to bargain with collectively because of the government's intervention? Britain's government actually pushed for their companies to back their unions to make it easier to bargain collectively for their benefits and pay. American managers, are they more prone to want to bargain with their employees individually? Is that something why America is so anti-union? And also, the article mentions resources that the Americans have that the other countries do not have. I know they say it's a lot of it's economic resources, but is that all of it? Is that all the resources they had was just money? Or did they have power and influence more than the British companies did? And that's what I got from the reading.
The article American Exceptionalism Revisited, The Importance of Management by Sanford M. Jacoby primarily focuses on America's low unionization rates. So the U.S. has a very low rate of unions based on the individualistic mentality. Because many feel that the U.S. rose to where it is now based on its own self-made power, many Americans follow suit and feel that they can achieve the highest level by doing it by themselves. This idea is also shown in our government and the American workforce that by resisting unions, we can still maintain that feeling of being self-made. Managers prefer not to deal with unions and are also striving to achieve maximum profits. So personally, I feel that if unions were substantially influential in increasing profits, managers wouldn't resist it so hard. The article credits David Granick with attributing America's approach to unions to national differences on the managers. That includes their education, their lawfulness to respects of taxation, career structure, and the attitudes towards risk. Overall, managers scored higher in traits like individualism and the need for recognition, according to Hofstede's research. So this makes managers stray away from unionization, which does not typically satisfy individual needs, but rather the needs and the goals of the collective group. There are a lot of economic incentives for managers to resist unions. The first one being that America's approach to collective bargaining is highly decentralized. The second being that unions are job conscious. They have a lot of focus on the working conditions, which could pose a threat to managerial authority. and the third being that American union density levels are very low compared to other countries. So managers are going to have a higher cost if they're dealing with unions, as well as experience potential strike risks, and then also have to deal with the economic cost and the threat to their authority. There's also a very high focus on exceptionalism and American managerial values. So to link that to the scientific management article, managers have found a way to control their labor force with the help of scientific methods without union interference and still increase their overall products and their productivity. As mentioned in Working in America, there are many forms of work that have become varied. So many jobs are outsourced to foreign countries who typically have unions. So one of the questions that I thought of was, are these American managers feeling pressure from their foreign workers who are used to having unions? Are they feeling pressure to form them? I also was curious because the article mentioned that the U.S. did not have a substantial role in the labor movement, and that might be part of why we are as conservative in that sense as we are. So my question was that if the U.S. had more substantial influence in the labor movement, would the current ideology still stand?
Article American Exceptionalism Revisited: The Importance of Management by Stanford Jacoby is about low union rates in America and American workers against unionism. An introduction to this paper is Exceptionalism, which stresses individualism and personal achievement. A variety of factors explain the American workers' weak interest in socialism and unionism. As Jacoby states, the absence of feudalism in the United States, early mass enfranchisement, working-class heterogeneity, and resultant cleavages among workers, fluid class boundaries, high rates of social mobility, high earning levels, the frontier pressure valve, and a dominant value system that stresses individualism and personal achievement. All employers seek to maximize profits and so would prefer not to deal with unions in general. Some might choose collective bargaining even if it costs more than union avoidance, but less than the most radical alternative on the political scene. American employers are different, and David Granick pointed out in a comparative study of management in developed countries. Economists were perplexed when told managers do not behave similarly when facing similar constraints. Granick found differences between French, British, and American companies in their approach to long-range investment decisions. These he attributed to national differences in management education, lawfulness with respect to taxation, attitudes towards risk, and career structures. For example, Hofstede found that American managers scored more highly than others on traits such as individualism and need for recognition, which this directly relates to the non-unionism environment in the United States. It can be assumed that the virtues in individualism and personal achievement made American managers less willing to accept collective bargaining and other goals of unionism than managers in other nations. This leads to the economics of American unions. First, the approach to collective bargaining is highly decentralized, centered on individual enterprise. 2, high job consciousness, such as working conditions, incentive wages, layoffs, even the conditions of the lunchroom. 3, union density levels in the United States are higher than any other nation. These 3 points have resulted in strong economic incentives to resist unions. The ideology behind unionism is prevalent in the American culture and shown through particular values and norms that employers found useful in mobilizing public opinion against unions. Lipset noted a few values: 1, equality; 2, individualism; and 3, achievement, which these can be traced to the fact that industrial capitalism emerged in the United States without having to confront the rigid status system of feudal and aristocratic past. For example, individualism. American employers have argued that unions have to suppress individual rights either by being undemocratic. Members have to obey the order of union bosses. And then 2, achievement, or American ethos of achievement that believe that everyone should try to be successful regardless of their background. So, pre-Great Depression America was a land of high wages and upward mobility. Once the Great Depression hit, unions looked attractive due to underconsumption and other factors, which this resulted in the Wagner Act. By the mid-1930s, the success of unionism in America depended on a variety of fortuitous circumstances: the timing and severity of the Depression, the solidity of the Roosevelt administration, and the passage of bargaining law consistent with Native traditions. By the late 1940s, management in companies gained some of their self-confidence and began to take more aggressive steps to contain union inroads. So this article is directly related to the scientific management and labor relations with Taylor's scientific method, which helps him meticulously control his labor force without unionism. If unionism prevailed, his scientific management practices would be at will of the union laws and practices. So after reading this article, I have raised a few questions. What direction would the American workforce have gone without the New Deal and Wagner Act? 2. What factors made America so inclined to be an individualistic country? And 3. What factors would help make unionization more attractive nowadays?